Hello, my name is Jane Chun. I'm a program director at the Compassion Institute. I'm the director for health and social transformation, and I oversee our work in the health space. And we've been busy supporting healthcare and public health workers throughout the pandemic. Well, the one obvious struggle has been just the overwhelming workload and stress and burnout from being on the response for so long without relief. Healthcare workers are some of the most resilient people out there, but we're all human and we can really only kind of keep going with long hours without adequate support and resources for so long. And what we've been hearing over and over is that currently the healthcare systems and the culture of healthcare and public health doesn't necessarily support the mental health of frontline workers, healthcare workers, public health workers, because often kind of admitting that you're feeling burned out or that you need mental health support is seen as a weakness. And also in some countries, there are policies that really penalize healthcare workers for even seeking mental health support. And so burnout broadly is one area. And of course, related to that is the moral distress that comes with not being able to do what these mission-driven professionals feel compelled to do. Right. So most healthcare workers entered the profession to serve and to heal, to be of service, but they're being prevented from doing so fully by several obstacles. The lack of PPE, lack of vaccines or infrastructure. These are unprecedented times, and so of course it is a time of crisis and emergency response. But we also hear a lot of stories around how healthcare workers have to choose between showing up at their job and risking their own safety and the safety of their family members. And just further adding to this moral injury and moral distress is that public health and healthcare has also become politicized. And so this resistance to vaccines, which of course we can get into the history, the historical roots of why some of that resistance is there, but also sometimes it comes from misinformation and the power of the social media to spread misinformation. And also we've been hearing more around this distress, just noticing the deterioration of the compassion that healthcare workers feel normally for their patients. Because in some countries, the patients that are showing up to be treated for COVID are those that are mostly unvaccinated, where the illness could have been prevented or severe illness could have been prevented. And so there's a real inner conflict and distress from noticing this kind of apathy and lack of compassion that they would normally feel. And along the same lines of moral distress is just sometimes feeling unappreciated by the institutions where people work, even as they're being worked to work longer hours. Sometimes leadership don't acknowledge the mental health crisis, the parallel mental health crisis and trauma that's happening within the healthcare community. And also kind of feeling unappreciated by the public or by patients who are sometimes combative or even hostile toward the healthcare workers. And so all of this, including the burnout, contributes to a sense of moral distress because really most healthcare workers have signed up for this job in order to serve. And so these many kind of multifaceted dimensions of obstacles that are preventing them from serving in the way that really feels meaningful and fulfilling just continues this kind of vicious cycle of burnout and distress. So during the pandemic at the Compassion Institute, we've been really doing our best to create spaces for healthcare workers, public health workers, to even think about caring for themselves, cultivating a little bit of self-compassion for themselves in this very, very challenging situation. And in these spaces, we also emphasize connecting with colleagues and peers who are going through what they're going through. Because one of the domains of burnout, which we know is a sense of isolation and cynicism, like you're in this alone. And so we've been offering kind of spaces, courses to practice kind of some very easily accessible skills for self-care and self-compassion. We prioritize just holding a kind of container so people can just breathe, just a little bit of breathing space. There's no right or wrong way to show up in these spaces, but we do, of course, offer some psychoeducation, and we often practice together as a group, check in with colleagues, have just conversations about how is it going, how are you doing, are you able to care for yourself or not? The last thing we want to do is make our courses another thing that people have to do. They need to do it well, and they didn't do the homework, and so they feel bad. It's really just about providing breathing space and the space to connect and process with peers. So in all of our partnerships with institutions and communities, we work with healthcare workers, public health workers at all levels, including senior management and leadership. It's really important for everyone to kind of normalize caring for ourselves, including the leadership. And we do this with an eye toward kind of shifting the culture, shifting the norms, and we do this with a lot of patience because we can't shift culture overnight. We just plant seeds where we can, and over the course of the past 2 years, we've been seeing those seeds sprout into little plants and flowers where we are seeing more of kind of critical mass within institutions that are talking more about self-compassion, which naturally, of course, leads to compassion for others and the ability to show up in challenging situations as our best selves in ways that feel fulfilling for healthcare workers. And lastly, I'll just mention that this is it's a humanitarian situation. It's a crisis. So we are at the same time humble about what we can do now in this moment. So as I mentioned, we're planting the seeds. We don't want to add to the time pressure to healthcare workers. So wherever people can join us, whenever they can join us for as short as or as long as they can, everyone is welcome in whatever way they're able to make space. And those little bits we're finding are making a difference. And of course, where we see opportunities for kind of more structural change around processes and systems within institutions or organizations or an organized structure. We work with the people in those organizations to try to shift at that level as well. Well, if this doesn't show us how important mental health and taking care of ourselves is, then I don't know what will. The load and pace are just unsustainable. We have to learn how to rest, how to recharge, and care for ourselves because we're only human. And we need to recharge so that we can stay in this work for the long haul. We're seeing unprecedented levels of healthcare workers leaving the profession after dedicating so many years of training to become healthcare workers. We also need to recharge. We need to rest in order to show up as our best selves. And we owe this to ourselves because we get the most joy when we're able to show up and serve in the best way that we can. And we owe it to the communities we serve, to the patients. For me personally, I do this kind of work because it's an ethical issue for me. It's safety and quality. Right? I don't come from healthcare, but I have worked in the humanitarian and international development space with several UN agencies, and I've seen what happens when we don't show up with self-awareness, when we project our own stress and whatever is happening inside on the communities we serve. And we absolutely don't want to cause harm, and we want to be able to serve in the best way possible. And so everyone is overwhelmed, including senior management and leadership. And I think all we can do is do the best we can, and hopefully at some point when the pandemic becomes more manageable, we can do more to elevate well-being and a culture and systems of self and collective care within healthcare. And at the moment, we just do the best we can. And of course, as part of this, the leadership need to model healthy behaviors. And really, there are trainings out there that train people to kind of say the right thing, or to do this or that, say this, don't say that, and that's fine. But really, at the root of how we show up is our mind, our neurophysiology, nervous system, and so we really believe that we need to train at that level, at the level of the nervous system, the level of neurophysiology, to be able to show up authentically as leaders. And really, leaders are not just at the top. We all have influence within the systems we're in. But we have the ability and the science to show that we can train to shift our habits and kind of our baseline state of being. And small interventions can really make a difference. I've been surprised at just how many people in our evaluations say that, this 6-week course has changed my life, for example. And that's not to promote our course, but that's just to say that short amount of intentional effort can really make a difference and be helpful for each one of us, for those of us who are interested in this kind of training, for whom this kind of training speaks to. And I would just end by prompting a question of, just, imagine what it might be like if everyone in your place of work or in your communities really intentionally came together to cultivate compassion for yourself and for each other.